Hey, what's up guys? So in this video, I'm going to walk you through upgrading my mom's car here and adding some new tech. I'm going to be installing a new radar detector, a dash camera, both front and rear, as well as a new wireless charging phone mount. Now, to keep everything clean, and instead of using up her cigarette lighters and having cables actually hanging down the dash, instead I'm just going to hardwire everything into the fuse box for a cleaner and more permanent install. And I figured while I do this install, I'll have some cameras rolling here so I can walk you guys through the process in case maybe you'd like to do something similar on your vehicle as well. Next, taking a look at all the different equipment that we're going to install in the vehicle here. For the radar detector, we're going to do the Escort Redline 360C. We've got the Hardwire power cable for it. Then for the dash cam, we've got our ThinkWare U1000. We've got the front dash cam, the rear dash cam, as well as the radar module for the upgraded parking mode recording. We've got the power cable for the dash cam, as well as the cable to connect both the front and the rear dash cams. Then for power, we've got our fuse taps here and our vampire taps. We've got our trim tool to help pull back the vehicle trim and tuck our cables behind it, as well as a multimeter for power, and then a set of crimpers. I'm also going to be installing a wireless charging phone mount in the car as well. It hasn't arrived yet, but through the magic of video editing, I'll make it look like it's all part of the same install. And I'm also going to be installing a hardwired USB port to help power the phone charger. Now, down in the video description, I'm going to go ahead and link you guys to all the different equipment that I'm going to be installing, as well as all the different tools that I'm using. You don't have to use all of this exact equipment, though. I mean, this is going to be kind of a generic install, and you can really use any radar detector, or any dash cam, or any phone mount. The process is going to be pretty much exactly the same. But down in the video description, I'll give you guys some links to some of the recommended equipment that I use here. Now, something else that I found helpful is to go in and actually label all the different cables that I install. That way, maybe afterwards, I know exactly what every single cable goes to. Now, the way that I normally handle that is I'll just grab a strip of duct tape like this, maybe cut off a little piece, and then for all the different cables that I install in the car, I'll just grab the tape like this, maybe wrap it around the end of the cable, and then grab a Sharpie and label it. In this case, just to do things a little bit simpler, I'm just going to use a label maker, but it does the exact same thing. All right, so first things first, we're going to go ahead and need to find our power source. And right here to the left of the steering wheel, we've got ourselves a fuse panel. And if we pop this off, you'll see that right behind here, we have a bunch of different fuses, and we're going to use these to go ahead and access power for all the gear. Now, on the back of this panel itself, it actually has a guide that goes over what all of the different fuses are. And what we're going to want to look for here is ideally something that says spare, like this, you can see. So this isn't connected to anything. If we don't have any spares, then we can use something that's maybe not safety related. Like, for example, here's an airbag. So we're not going to want to tap into this. And the idea is, in case something goes wrong with the wiring, we don't want it to compromise anything safety related. So I want it with something maybe, controlling the sunroof or, a spare, something like this, so it doesn't affect anything else in the car. Probing around a little bit, I decided I'm going to use these two fuses right here, and here's why. First off, they're both spares, which I like, so it doesn't affect anything else. And these two fuses correlate to this one as well as this one, and what I like about them is they both behave a little bit differently. Now, some fuses are going to be ignition triggered, meaning they're normally turned off, but they only provide power when you turn on your car, and this is nice so that your electronics automatically turn on when you start your car, so radar detector fires up and everything, but then once you park and you turn off your car, everything shuts off so it doesn't drain your car battery while your car is turned off. Now, there's other types of fuses that are always powered and they're always connected to the battery even when your car is turned off. This is nice for something like the dash cam if I want it to function when the car is in parking mode. That way I turn the car off and the dash cam can switch over into parking mode and continue recording even when I'm not there. Now, a lot of times the way that these dash cams know when to switch between driving and parking mode is they're also going to be connected to the ignition triggered source, and that's going to kind of trigger the dash cam and tell it when it has power and it should switch to driving mode versus when the car turns off and it should switch into parking mode. Now, not every car is going to have an ignition triggered power source like this. On some cars, they're all going to be hot all the time. If this is the case, you might have to do a little bit more work, maybe installing a relay, or you can take it to a professional if you need a little bit more work done. But a lot of times, and in this car that is the case, you can find just an ignition triggered power source, which is very convenient. Now, when you're looking at all these different fuses, how do you know which ones are ignition triggered and which ones are always on? Well, the way that I do it is I use my multimeter here, and I'm just going to switch it here to measure DC voltage, and then I can just probe around here with the probes. I've got one probe for ground and another one for power, and I can just check to see maybe which ones have power. There's other tools available that are a little bit simpler. You basically hook them up to power and ground, and the LED will light up when there's power, and it stays off when there's not. So just a simple yes, no, it has power, but this is a little bit nicer just to provide voltage, and it could do a couple other things as well, but either tool is going to work fine. All right, so looking at our multimeter here, we're going to have two probes. The black one is going to connect to our ground, and then the red one is actually going to probe into our power source. I've got it set to measure DC voltage, and you can see it's set to 20 volts right now. I know cars run maybe 12 to 13 volts or so a 20 volt cap sounds good. That way we can measure stuff under 20. So the way this is going to work is I'm going to take my ground probe and just connect it here somewhere to the metal part of the vehicle. And then if you take a closer look at the fuses themselves, you'll see that on either side of the number, maybe right there and right there, there's little openings. And if you stick your probe in either one of those, you'll actually contact the metal inside the fuse. And this is going to be a great way to tell if that fuse has power or not. Now, if there's no power being provided, the multimeter is going to continue to read 0 volts. However, if there is power provided, you're going to see it somewhere around maybe 11 or 12 volts. If you have the car on and the alternator is running, voltage is going to show somewhere around maybe 13 or 14 volts. Now, what I found probing around here a little bit is this fuse right here is always hot, so this is going to be great for our dash cam to get power when the car is parked. And this one here is ignition triggered. This one's only going to provide power when the car is on, so this is going to be great to run the radar detector, to run the phone mount, and the ignition triggered wire for the dash cam itself. Now, you're going to want to go ahead and remove the fuses out of the fuse box like this. They make fuse pullers, which are the best way to remove these. You can also use a set of pliers, but fuse pullers are usually the best way to do it. Additionally, there's different sizes of fuses, and you want to make sure that once you start getting accessories to plug into your different fuse slots, you get the ones that are the right sized for your vehicle. Next, let's take a look at how we're going to tap into those fuse slots to get power for our different devices. So we're going to use this device right here. It's called an ADA circuit. And the idea is it's going to allow you to tap into that fuse slot and add some additional wiring to add other devices. Now, there's going to be 2 slots that you'll see here. Now, one of them, this top one right here, is going to be for the additional devices that you add. This bottom one right here is going to be for your existing devices. And an easy way to learn that is if you just take a look, you'll notice this wire right here is actually in line with the top part. So this top section right here where this fuse is going to go is the one that connects here. And so again, this bottom one here is the one that's for your existing devices. And so you're going to want to take a fuse like this. You're going to take the old one that you pulled out of that slot and you're going to put it right here into this bottom slot. And then you're going to take the new second fuse and that one's going to go here into this top slot here like this. Now, as far as how big this fuse should be, you can basically just add up the amperage ratings for all the different devices that you're using. A radar detector may take maybe half an amp to an amp, and same thing with the dash cam, maybe half an amp to an amp or so. The phone charger that I'm using takes up to 6 amps, so I think a 10 amp fuse should be plenty for what I'm doing, but for most devices, maybe a radar detector and a dash cam, 3 amps should be good, 5 amps should be plenty. Now, something else to keep in mind is you want to make sure that you install this properly. If you plug it in 180 degrees backwards, you're not going to be getting any fuse protection, and here's why. The idea here is power is only going to flow through one of the sides here in the fuse tap. And so let's say power is going to flow in through this side. It's supposed to go across the fuse like this and then back into ground, right? Or power goes in here, it goes across the fuse and then across here to your other devices. If you plug it in so that this side has power, power is just going to go straight here to your devices and it's not going to be going across the fuse as well. So you're not going to have any protection against fires or anything with this fuse. So you just want to make sure that when you're probing around in your fuse panel, you want to make sure that this spot right here is the one that has power, so the power flows across the fuse like this and then over to your devices. Now again, an easy way to check that is to again just pull out your multimeter, and we're just going to probe around here for one side and then for the other side. And as you probe around, you'll find that one side, when you connect it, you are going to be getting a power reading on your multimeter versus the other side, it's still going to read 0 volts. And in my case, this is the side right here. When I do this, I do get a power reading on the multimeter. And for that reason, I'm going to want to make sure that power flows in this side. It's going to go across the fuse, and then the wire, it's going to stick out here to this side. So that's really important, again, just to make sure that these fuses do their job. So now that we know how this is supposed to plug in, let's go ahead and put our fuse in here. I'm going to go ahead and just pop the fuse in. So now we've got a 10 amp fuse in this case for the dash cam, radar detector, and the phone mount. And now power is going to be able to flow across here when we have this plugged in correctly. So now the question is, how do we access the power in here for the different devices? Well, there's 2 different ways that we're going to take a look at for how you can do this. Now, first off, here's a look at our dash cam cable. We've got 3 different wires. We've got our black ground back here. We have our red wire. You can see this is for the accessory connected fuse. So this is going to be turning on and off with the car. And then this yellow one here, you can see it actually says battery. So this we want to make sure it's got power all the time. It's connected directly to the vehicle's battery. Now, if you look at the tip of the cable here, you notice it's just a blank, empty, exposed wire like this, right? Now, the way that we can connect this in is if you take a look at the end of the ADA circuit, there's a slot here to where we can just slide this cable in like that. And then we can take our crimpers and just bite directly down on here so that this metal is gonna bite down on the end of this cable and that's gonna make contact. Now there's another way to do it. Take a look at the end of my radar detector cable here. You notice it's got this type of connector, which looks a little bit different. The idea here is if you take a look inside the center, there's a little piece of metal there. And we wanna make sure that this metal can make contact with the metal wiring in here. And these things are called vampire taps or T-taps. And the way these are gonna work is you're gonna wanna use something like this. And this, if you take a look inside here, there's a little bit of metal. This metal is actually gonna be biting through this kind of rubber sheathing, this coating. It's gonna bite through here and actually make contact with the metal inside and then provide a connector for this to plug into. So the idea is you're gonna be able to take this connector right here and you'll notice it's gonna be able to start kind of biting in through the cable, and then you're gonna take a set of crimpers to bite down and squeeze and make the connection through the red sheathing. Then once you do that, you should see this should bite all the way through and it's gonna click together on this side and it's gonna create basically a connector for us right here to plug in our other devices. And now we're gonna be able to take our connectors like this and just slide them directly on to this new connector that we've made right there. Now, if you'd like to use the end of the ATA circuit, you can basically take your metal cable and you're gonna insert it here into this tip, into this connector, and then you're gonna take your crimpers right there and you're gonna use it to actually bite down on this tip right there. This way the crimpers make a nice strong connection both on the metal wiring itself and on the sheathing to make sure that it holds it in place and it doesn't slide out accidentally. Then once you've done that, it should look a little something like this. You'll notice I've got this connector here for my radar detector, as well as this connector here for the dash cam, and then you're able to add on additional devices here as needed. Now, coming back to this end, because this was just a spare fuse, it doesn't do anything, I don't actually have to plug anything back here, but if you're using something that was part of the car actively, you wanna make sure that you take your existing fuse that you pulled and you pop it into this bottom slot. And then next, I'm gonna go ahead and do the exact same thing with the other ATA circuit. This is the one that's gonna be always hot, and so this one is gonna hook up to the dash cam as far as the wire that wants to hook up to the car battery. Now, something to keep in mind though is for these connectors here, if you notice any sort of exposed metal like this, you're gonna wanna make sure that it's covered up, maybe with some electrical tape or something. You don't want this maybe potentially touching something metal in there and shorting, you know, from power to ground and blowing a fuse. Another easy solution is just to take this cover right here, and if it kind of slides up a little bit, you can just make sure it covers any sort of exposed metal. Then for our ground wires, you'll notice both of these kind of have these rings or these hooks. These are designed to actually connect to a screw that's connects somewhere to the metal part of your vehicle's chassis. So we're gonna look for some metal screws and attach these directly to those. Now, looking around my car, it looks like I've got a screw here that should work well. And the reason I like it, if you take a look at the back side here, it's connected right to the metal chassis of the vehicle, so this is gonna be perfect as a ground. Plus, you'll notice that the ground connectors here that I have slide on perfectly, which is great. And now that I've got my labels printed for all the different cables, they're ready to be installed. And then once the cables come in for the phone charger, I'll do the exact same thing and I'll be able to attach them directly on here as well. So for the phone charger, I'm just gonna go ahead and add a second ATA circuit like this. There we go, and now it's connected, and this is a great way for any sort of future expansion just to add more devices here. Now we're gonna grab a socket wrench, go ahead and start unscrewing this screw here. Then we're gonna take these ground wires and just attach them directly here to the bolt like this, and then run the cables back inside. I was wanting to attach them in here, but it looks like this is actually welded directly to the car, so I can't go underneath that bolt, so that's why I'm actually going on the outside. And then there we go, there's our ground connectors now connected here to the bolt. And now we can go ahead and start taking these connectors and plugging them into the fuse box and seeing if this all works. Now, something I didn't realize until just now is one of these connectors, it's kind of big and bulky, so the ignition triggered one on top is actually blocking the connector for the always hot one. So for that reason, I'm gonna have to go in here and actually find a different one to plug in the always hot power connector. Now, probing around a little bit, it looks like the best way to go is to use this one, because this one is always hot, and then I have another spare over here that is ignition triggered, so I can use these two, and because they're far away, the cables and stuff shouldn't get in the way. And so if you look in here now, that's exactly what we've got. We've got the one on the left is our always hot one, and the one on the right is gonna be our ignition triggered power source. Now, a moment of truth, let's see if this turns on the radar detector. Excellent, there we go. We now have our ignition triggered power for the radar detector. Next, we'll go ahead and try this here with the dash cam. And this might be a little bit different because the voltage is low. So there we go, we start up the engine and the dash cam power is on. This does have voltage management, and I know the power was kind of low here, the voltage rather, and so that's designed to shut off the dash cam, so we'll need to make sure this is charged up before we test the always on power source. Otherwise the dash cam is going to shut off, which is what it's designed to do. But either way, it looks like this is working, which is great. All right, so now we've got all of our fuses in here, but I want to get a little bit better access, so I'm actually going to go in through the side here, and this is also going to help me once I'm ready to start running the cables up into the headliner as well. Alrighty, so we've got our radar detector mounted, so we're going to go ahead and run the cable up to this. And then on the other side over here, we've got the dash cam and the dash cam's radar module for its parking mode over here. And then I just went ahead and ran the two cables together here and kind of tucked it up in the headliner. And when it comes to mounting and aiming the dash cam, it's good to either use the LCD in the back of the dash cam if it comes with one, or to hook it up to your phone over Wi-Fi and use your phone to make sure that it's aimed and mounted properly. All right, so now I want to go ahead and run my cables up from the side panel here, kind of up along where this weather stripping would go. It's going to go across this way and then up into the headliner. Now, I definitely want to keep an eye out for the airbag. I don't want to do anything that's going to potentially be an issue in case of an accident, right? So I know in this car, and now that this panel is loosened, I'm going to be able to run the cable up this way and kind of tuck the cable up and behind the airbag. That way, again, it doesn't interfere with the airbag or prevent it from coming out toward the driver in case of an accident. Knock on wood. Now I can plug in the radar detector and start tucking up this cable up into the headliner. And then I can also run the power cable up to the dash cam and begin tucking this one up into the headliner too. Now, some cars I've noticed are going to be tough to kind of pull the headliner down. This part's really tough. Sometimes certain cars are really easy to pull this down, and it's not a big deal to tuck it in. Sometimes there's even clips that you can pop down to make it a little bit easier, but it always varies from car to car. Then back over here, we can go ahead and pop this airbag panel back on, and then we can start just kind of tucking the cable up like this, and we can just start pushing this weather stripping back behind it to keep it in place. And then chances are we're going to wind up having just some extra slack on the cable here like this, so we can just start neatly bunching it up together and then just kind of zip tie it and put it in place. All right, now as far as installing the rear cam, this is going to be pretty straightforward as well. We're just going to want to go ahead and clean off the rear window to make sure it's nice and clean. And then we're going to peel off the tape here on top of the dash cam. We're going to stick it in place, and then we're just going to start running and tucking the wiring. And again, you can use the dash cam's phone app to make sure that the rear dash cam is aligned properly too. And then once you've got it in a place where you like it, it's just a matter of, again, just starting to tuck the cabling around and running it across the trim and across the vehicle. Now, when it comes to tucking in these cables behind the trim in the rear, if you've got airbags back here as well, a lot of times you can pop off the panel, and again, just make sure that you're going out of the way of any airbags here too. Now, when you start running this cable from the rear of the vehicle back to the front, you can either just run it across the top here like this. That's probably the most convenient thing, just to get to the dash cam right there. You also might wind up with a bunch of extra slack, so a lot of times it might be easier to kind of go down in here, and down here you'll find kind of extra places to sort of bunch up the cable and just wind up any extra slack. So again, whatever works best in your vehicle. Another alternative is if you want to go the high route, you can run the cable up here, and then instead of just going straight to the dash cam over there, you can also take any extra slack and just run it down in there, and if you have room maybe behind the glove box or something, you can also stuff cable back there. Now in this car though, for example, I found pulling off this panel for the B-pillar for the airbag is really, really tough. So instead, I actually wound up going the low route and running the cable down through there. And so as you can see, the cable is actually running here alongside the passenger side of the vehicle. I had to pop off some plastic panels here that were sitting right there so that I can actually start running the cable up this way and then over to the dash cam. And then like I mentioned before, any excess cable like this can just be bunched up, and then I can just stuff it in here kind of beside the glove box. Now continuing on, now that the phone mount has arrived, we can go ahead and attach this to the dash, and we also have our power source. This is basically a drop-in replacement for a cigarette lighter power outlet, and it just turns it into two USB ports. We're just going to tuck this away inside the car. We've got our two terminals there for both positive and negative, as well as our cable here to hook it up. So these connectors are just going to slide onto the back, onto those two connectors, and then we have our two ring connectors right here, one for ground and one for power. Now attaching the ground is going to be pretty straightforward. This can just attach right to the same screw that everything else is connected to. But this positive terminal is a little bit different. So what I'm going to do is wind up lopping off this ring connector, and then I'm going to strip back the insulation on the cable, and then I'll go ahead and attach the vampire tap so I can plug it into my existing system. Then we add on our labels, and it's basically plug and play from here. We go ahead and secure our grounds in place. We plug in our power right there next to the radar detector itself. Then just a quick test to make sure this power is on. Perfect, like to see that. Then same idea with the charger plugged in. Great, looks like that's gonna power on. Go ahead and pop this in, it opens up, holds it in place. And great, look at that, our wireless charging is up and running too. Awesome. Then we can start kind of bundling our cables up, setting everything aside and making sure we have access to the USB ports there. We'll go ahead and plug in the phone into one, and we have a second one now for future expansion. Now to secure the phone charger itself, it comes with this base plate, kind of a sticky pad on one side that goes there, and then the suction cup attaches there. Otherwise you can just attach it directly to the windshield, but it's a little bit farther back, so I think I'm just gonna put it right here on the dash. Then once we have the pad mounted, we can take our suction cup and just kind of get it right in place there, and then we'll just clamp it down. So that should hold nice and strong. And then once the mount's in place, there's a USB Type-C cable coming out the bottom here, and then it's a question of if I want to route it maybe back that way and along there. But I think in this case, maybe the easiest route is just to go down here and tuck it straight down here behind the steering wheel itself. So that should be a pretty quick run and easy to get back there into the fuse panel. Now this panel here pops off super easily, and just makes it really simple to run the cable down into this way, just across the steering column and down into there. I think at first I'm going to leave a little bit of slack in the cable here just to make sure, in case maybe she wants to reposition the phone or maybe run it in landscape mode or something, just to give her a little bit of flexibility as far as the phone cable. And then once I get it all dialed in, I'll maybe make it a little bit tighter, but we'll leave a little bit of slack in there for now. Then we can just plug our USB cable right into there, and we are all set. I'll probably want to just make sure everything is nice and secure. I don't want anything kind of jangling around and making noise or anything, so I can give it a quick test drive, adjust anything as needed, make sure nothing is flapping, kind of like this. So I'll adjust those little things, and then it should be all set. And finally, here's a look at the finished product. We've got our phone mounted right there on a wireless charging phone mount. We've got our radar detector, as well as our dash cam for the front, and then another one back in the rear. So yeah, there you go. There's a quick look as far as how to do this. This install is designed to be pretty generic, so you can do it with really most any radar detector or any dash cam. You don't have to use these specific ones. But again, just to make it easier, I'll link to all the different stuff that I show here as far as this kind of nifty wireless charging thing, which is pretty cool. It's better than the one I got in my car. Maybe I should get one of these too. The radar detector, the dash cam, the rear dash cam, which you can now see right there as well. But yeah, so there you go. Thanks so much for watching. Let me know if you have any questions. Other than that, yeah, that's it. Drive safe, and I'll see you in the next video.